This episode of the My Latin Life podcast is brought to you by BitRefill. BitRefill is the best way to spend your crypto in Latin America. Purchase gift cards or mobile refills from more than 3,500 brands in 186 countries instantly, safely, and privately. Visit bitrefill.com for more information. Welcome back to the My Latin Life podcast. Since 2014, My Latin Life has been your trusted guide to traveling and living in Latin America. My guest today is Nora Dunn from theprofessionalhobo.com. She's been a digital nomad since 2006, an OG in the travel blogging world, and we welcome her to the show.
Woohoo! Thank you very much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Absolutely. Where are you calling from today?
I am currently in my Toronto base. I have a place here in Toronto. I'm here maybe a few months a year, but T-minus 6 days to my next trip, which is going to be 4 months long.
Where are you headed?
I'm going to spend a few weeks with my good friend in South Florida. And then in the name of trying new things, I'm going to experience my first winter in 18 years. And I'm going to do it in the mountains of Bulgaria. I'm dedicated to getting really good at skiing this year. And hopefully I'm working with a hypothesis that snow sucks less if you can play in it rather than having to commute in it. So this is my theory. I'm hoping it's going to work out okay.
Correct. Well, the things we learn after 15 years, 20 years on the road.
Right, exactly. Where are you at the moment?
I am in Mexico.
You're in Mexico. Awesome. Cool.
I'm in Mexico. So, by the way, this is an audio-only podcast, but to give people an idea, so Nora's got the biker jacket on, I think, something like that. You're ready for this to be a video podcast.
No, actually, believe it or not, if this were a video podcast, I'd have turned it around because I've got a beautiful map of the world behind me here and I have a studio setting. So no, this is believe it or not, this is just casual, Nora, but the jacket is because it's a little bit cold out today. Winter is coming in Toronto, which is why I normally leave at this time of year. I just normally go somewhere warm for the whole winter. So I'm having to it's a new pack job for traveling carry-on for winter sports as well.
Would you consider yourself a snowbird in the classical sense or something more advanced than that?
Well, I don't know that necessarily advanced is the word to choose, but when I think of a snowbird, I think of someone who goes somewhere warm just for the winter and then returns. And because I'm a lifestyle traveler, returning is a nebulous concept. So, however, for really 18 years until now, whenever it gets cold, wherever I am in the world, I typically would just switch hemispheres or get as close to the equator as possible. So I've definitely chased the heat and the sunshine around the world for all of these years. So this is my new experiment, is checking out the snow.
Interesting. How many countries have you been to at this point?
Yeah, to be honest, I keep losing count, but I think I'm closing in on 80.
On 80. Okay, that's awesome. I guess probably a good time at the start of the episode. Tell us a little bit more about your background, like how people know you through the blog and kind of your projects and trajectory, all that good stuff.
Cool. Well, 2006, of course, is when I got started in this lifestyle, but that is also what I refer to as the pioneer days or the prehistoric times of being a digital nomad, because it really wasn't a thing. It wasn't a recognized lifestyle. There were no tools or communities or blogs. Blogs didn't even exist as, in the same way that they do now. They were just glorified online journals. So that's exactly what my blog was. It was the adventures of a girl with no fixed address, and was really just for, my family and close friends to check in on me rather than me sending them emails about what I was doing. It was a creative outlet. But I was left to my own devices to really figure out what this lifestyle would look like. And I just kind of figured it out from the ground up. I mean, when I left Toronto in January of 2007, after selling everything that I owned, I didn't know what I would do, where I would go, how I would make money. I had some vague notion that I would, maybe go to Costa Rica and take an outward bound course and become an outdoor education instructor, because maybe that would be a transferable skill. Like, I just didn't know. But it wasn't long before, lightning struck, and I realized that with a laptop and an internet connection, I could actually
Hmm.
make a living as a freelance writer. So those were my initial career ambitions while I learned what lifestyle travel and full-time travel could look like. And so I hit every bump on the learning curve of learning the lifestyle, as well as learning to work remotely, as well as learning the balance of the two. However, it was an adventure every step of the way. And I've had the good fortune to be able to travel through and live in well over 70 countries in that time since. And to really, because I've been living on an open-ended ticket all of these years, I've also had the option of, if I got somewhere and it was a really interesting place that I wanted to explore further, where I made some inroads locally that were, interesting, that I wanted to deepen those connections that I had, I just stay longer.
Yep.
Visa permitting, right? I mean, and in many cases, I could just leave and come back and refresh the visa, or find a way to extend the visa in the countries that I was visiting. So, as such, really over the years, I've traveled in some cases so slowly it was imperceptible. Like, I spent a year and a half in Australia, on and off, about 9 months in New Zealand. I spent 2 years in the Caribbean on the island of Grenada. And then I spent a lot of time in Latin America. The countries that I concentrated the most on is I was in Peru for 2 years and
Wow.
Ecuador for about 9 months. But other than I also spent many months in a variety of other Latin American countries. So as that was a part of the world that really resonated for me. So and recently I've been spending more time in Europe. So the only continent that is really sorely missing on my list is Africa, of which I've only been to Tunisia and South Africa. I was actually supposed to be on a 4-month trip through 4 African countries right now, but I realized that I had overextended myself and I had to make some changes to my travel plans. And the beauty of this lifestyle is you can do that. You get to call the shots. So I like playing around with my travel pace and travel destinations, but sometimes my enthusiasm gets me in a little too deep, and sometimes I need to back out and make sure that I take care of myself first, because self-care on the road is numero uno. It's the most difficult thing to do, but also the most important thing to do.
Hmm. What does self-care mean to you?
Well, it means I've burned out a lot. um, so I've learned things the hard way a lot of times. I mean, I do be as an entrepreneur and a creative who works online. I'm a very driven and disciplined person, and I do enjoy working, although I can easily get out of balance. I also feel like the travel lifestyle, as well as the remote work, remote work plus travel lifestyle seemingly go hand in hand. They're like peanut butter and chocolate. But in some ways, they're actually contradictory forces, because when you're traveling, you're in a new place, you're excited about the place that you're at, and you want to explore it. But if you're also working full time at the same time, it can create this internal conflict and sense of guilt. So while you're working, you're looking out the window going, God, I feel guilty for not exploring my destination. And then when you're out exploring your destination, you may also feel like, oh God, I really should be getting work done. So balancing these opposing forces. But
Hmm.
most importantly, and probably one of the most significant lessons I learned along the way and continue to learn in various ways, is that travel as a lifestyle also takes a monumental amount of work and time and energy. Just
Hmm.
learning how to survive at a destination, like just the daily tasks. Like, I was in Bulgaria last summer, and it took me, like I eat yogurt for breakfast. Like, it's not a big deal, right? Yogurt and fruit should be pretty easy, right? The amount of time it took me standing in front of this dairy section in Bulgaria, where I don't understand what I'm looking at, or what's sour cream and what's cottage cheese and what's something else entirely, what's from a cow, what's from a goat. I couldn't figure out what was yogurt. It took me 20
Yeah.
minutes.
So yeah, Bulgaria grocery store. I'm pretty sure the only rule is don't ask them for Greek yogurt or they'll go crazy.
Well, I knew better than to do that, but of course the irony was I wanted Greek yogurt. I want the thick style Balkan yogurt. So it was definitely a challenge. And
Right.
these are the things I love about travel, is just getting to know a destination and learning how people live, work, cook, shop, socialize, all of that stuff. But man, it takes a lot more time. And that's
Yeah,
important
I
to
think
build
there's
that
pros
into
and
a
cons to
lifestyle.
that. I think because if not, you're just in zombie mode where 95% of your day is like pre-programmed. someone in Toronto, they just know what subway stop to get off at. They know where they know what Loblaws they're going to go to, what grocery store. And there's just no thinking going on in their day anymore. And you really just sort of zombie your way through life at a certain point through the routine. And that's what kind of, I think, a lot of travelers I speak to, they say that time slows down when you travel because every day is more memorable and that kind of thing.
Yeah, absolutely. I could not agree more. And I think I actually wrote an article that was exactly that: time slows down while traveling. And that actually came to me because I think I was trying to get a hold of somebody back in Toronto about something. And I hadn't heard from them in what felt like a really long time. And I got back to them. I reached out to them again. And I'm like, why haven't I heard from you? They're like, Nora, it's only been 3 days since you sent me a message. I'm like, oh my God, it felt like it was 3 weeks. But yeah, our sense of time changes. Also, too, to your point about the zombie mode, I don't know. When I lived in Toronto and I had that regular routine, like I think we've all done this at some stage where you're going somewhere and then you get there and then suddenly you think, I don't remember how I got here. Like I don't remember the drive at all. I knew I got in my car and went to the place, but I totally tuned out for that ride
Right.
or that subway ride or that
And
bus
that
ride. I
becomes a
think it's
year of your life like that. I had
right.
family visit me in Mexico 2 years ago. I'm sure they can remember that week, every moment of that week, even though it was 2 years ago, right? But they don't remember let's just say that was in January. They don't remember what they did in February of
Yeah.
2022, right? They don't remember what they did in March 2022, but they remember January because they were in Mexico and they remember going to the taco shop and the cenote and all that type of stuff. And so we sort of remember what's unique or worth remembering, and then we kind of get rid of the rest of it. And it's just it just keeps life from being like a pan, I guess.
I think travel and the act of changing your environment requires you to be more present
Yeah.
because now you've got to be alert and you also want to be. But yeah, I think when we're looking at the same scenery that we're used to seeing, we tune it out a little bit. So the blessing of travel really is that it does bring us more into the present moment.
Speaking of the present moment, was that a knock at the door or just like random noise?
No, someone's doing renovations next to me.
Okay. Okay, no
So
worries.
sorry
We
about
call
that.
that, well, you got the reverse Latin hammer. We call it the Latin hammer when just random noise out of nowhere.
Right, exactly. Well, good. I'm glad it's just like home.
Cool. Yeah, yeah, feels like Mexico. Cool. So you have 60,000 subscribers or followers on YouTube. Is that your biggest platform?
My website is my biggest platform because I've had it since the beginning. And because I was one of the original travel bloggers, it definitely garnered me just sheer tenure in the industry has garnered me a fair bit of
Hmm.
attention. But YouTube is fast closing that gap. And I've had my YouTube channel also since like 2007, but please, for the love of all things holy, do not look at the early stuff. It's painful. But and I've been on and off with it. I would enthusiastically start a series and then I wouldn't get kind of whatever feedback from it that I wanted, whether I was looking for likes or subscribes or just, interaction or publicity. And it was a lot of work and I'd stop. So I started and stopped a lot with my channel. But about a year ago, I decided to get serious about it. And I decided to finally get out of my own way and start creating content that people actually want to watch rather than creating whatever random stuff I was inspired to create in a moment, and it's been paying off. I've been able to combine the kind of art of creativity with the science of business and algorithms to,
Mm.
not compromise my values and my creativity, but then also to be creating content that seems to be resonating with a lot of people.
Yeah, your videos do well. You get like 50K views of video type stuff.
Yep, it's great. It's a lot of fun. I'm enjoying it.
And the YouTube for the listeners, it'll be linked in the show notes. But it's Nora Dunn at Nora Dunn.
That's me. Yeah. Yep. YouTube.com/Nora Dunn, something like that. If you
Okay.
search for Nora Dunn, you will find me.
This episode of the My Latin Life podcast is brought to you by Language Blend, the new best way to learn Spanish. Language Blend focuses on what you actually need to live and get by abroad. With daily one-on-one lessons, a dedicated texting partner, it's like living in a Spanish-speaking country without ever leaving home. Go to languageblend.com for more information. Yeah, I mean, you're crushing it. Like every video is getting more than 10K, which is like pretty hard to do.
Thank you.
So YouTube, and then the website. How many articles have you written in 17, 18 years?
I currently have almost 1,000 articles on the
Published,
site. Yes.
published live, almost 1,000.
But that has, I mean, which also means that I've also published more than 1,000 because I definitely have trimmed down some of the
Mhm.
things that really weren't serving any purpose.
Makes sense. That's huge. And then I guess you did freelance writing for other publications as well. You've probably gotten your articles and travel guides and stuff in all the magazines.
I have indeed. So in my former life, the thing that I sold in order to start traveling full time was a financial planning practice. So because of that, I brought into the travel lifestyle a certain expertise in finance. So
Mhm.
when I started looking at developing my freelance writing career, something interesting happened. I noticed financial publications were hiring me to write about travel, and travel publications were hiring me to write about finance. Because in both cases, they were kind of unique pitches that they had not seen. So, somewhere in the middle over the years, I kind of became known for this niche in the finance of travel. And that also got exacerbated on my website because in my first couple of years of traveling full time, I didn't really know how much it was going to cost. I was just figuring things out. And I was, of course, ever the financial planner. I actually kept track of all the money that I was spending. And I was shocked that in those first 2 years of full time travel, I spent way less than I actually ever spent to live in Toronto. Now, part of that was because I was employing unique and creative travel tips like volunteering in exchange for accommodation, of which there are a variety of ways to do that. And I was dabbling with frequent flyer miles to save money on airfare, and I was traveling slowly. So that can really reduce your cost of living on the road. But I
Mm.
was so inspired by those first 2 years. It was $17,000 in each of those 2 years that I spent. And I'm like, wow, I just lived full time around the world, like in Hawaii and Australia and Asia for 17 grand. So over the next 10 years, I published my annual income and my expenses to prove that full time travel was achievable and could be financially sustainable. So that then
Mm.
turned my website into a tool to help people plan their travel lifestyles and to understand what financially sustainable travel is, which is a term that I kind of inadvertently ended up coining.
Yeah, financially sustainable travel. You write on your
Mhm.
website that it's not budget travel and it's not about environmental sustainability. It's about, I guess, supporting yourself while traveling such that you're not living off savings and the bank accounts going up every month.
Exactly. Well said.
And tell me about that. Tell me about financially sustainable travel.
So it can take a variety of different formats, but there are three main pillars to financially sustainable travel. The first pillar is earning money remotely in one way or another. Now, it could be a remote job or a remote business. Could also be a passive stream of income, perhaps from, maybe you own and manage properties and you've got that stream of income coming in. But ultimately, it's a way to earn money that does not require your physical presence anywhere.
Right.
The second pillar, of course, is um, finding creative ways to spend that money. So sometimes, it all depends. A travel lifestyle can cost as much or as little as we want it to be. It can cost a lot less than we think it would need to cost, but it also can cost orders of magnitude more than we might think. And that all depends on you and where you go and your preferences for how you live your life on the road. But there
Mhm.
are a lot of creative spending choices that you can make with a travel lifestyle that will enable you to spend way less money than we might think you would spend traveling or living on the road 52 weeks a year. And then the third pillar is balancing the two, balancing the money coming in with the money that goes out in order to sustain this lifestyle for as long as you want. So there are a lot of different moving parts that come to designing your life to travel full time. from logistics, like, how do you get your mail, and what are the best kind of ways to save money on currency exchange rates, and how do you travel with your bank cards? What are some ways to stay secure? So I really, in my articles, I go deep into different ways to execute the travel lifestyle. And one of my recent experiments has been a lot more with co-living and co-working programs as a way to get that better work-life balance, to have a fulfilling experience on the road, and also to enjoy a sense of community with other people who have the same lifestyle and similar ways of living.
Yeah, and I think the community aspect is important. Maybe we'll come back to that, but I want to keep talking about the financial thing because that's the biggest piece. It's like a lot of people are like, "Fuck it, I'll make some friends." Like once I get some money coming in, you know what I mean? So that's the biggest piece of it is making money, and I'm sure it's obviously evolved. Like in 2006, 2013, there was only a certain limited number of skill sets you could do because Zoom wasn't super developed at that point in time. So I feel like you either had to be a computer software developer or maybe a freelance writer in your case because you don't have to talk to anyone. They just tell you, boom, knock out 5,000 words and you do it, something like that. Or like how have things evolved and what would you recommend to people now in 2023, 2024?
Well, certainly in the days of old, remote careers, location independent options were definitely very limited. Yeah, you had to be a writer, a developer, a graphic designer. That was about it. Those are the standard careers that people figured could be done online. But of course, now it is so much different. And the big game changer, I mean, the game changer it's definitely been evolving quite quickly. And even prior to the pandemic, there were a lot of opportunities to work remotely. But the real game changer, of course, was the pandemic, when virtually overnight, companies around the world were forced to go remote or become obsolete. So we found new ways of doing business online. And systems were created in order to allow people to do all kinds of things online in new and wonderful ways. So here we are on the other end of the pandemic, and millions, if not billions, of people now have remote careers. And certainly a portion of these people are looking at taking those careers on the road and seeing what that looks like. So the job aspect of it, if we just break it down in terms of working remotely, there are three categories of jobs that you can have. You could be
Okay.
an employee, you can be an employee working for a company.
Hmm.
You could be a freelancer where you work for yourself, but also you kind of work for your clients. It's kind of like you're working for a bunch of bosses, but you do get to call the shots. You get to hire and fire your bosses. Or you can be an entrepreneur. And all freelancers are entrepreneurs, but not all entrepreneurs are freelancers. Because depending on the entrepreneurial venture you have, you might have a business that has a different structure than what a freelancer would be doing.
Mm.
Those are the broad categories that people can start to think about when they're looking at remote careers for
And
themselves.
what would you say is the best way to get started for most people? Like, let's just say your little cousin from Toronto comes rolling in at Christmas dinner and was like, "I want to do what you do." What are you gonna tell them?
It's a good question. And my wheelhouse is not in helping people find remote careers. I help people when they already have the career. But certainly, as a way to get started, take a look at what you're doing. Like, what are your skills? What do you do, and what do you like to do? What is your current job or career? And can that immediately be done online, even though you might currently be going into an office to do it? If it cannot be done online, if what you do is for your job is a physical job, is there something else that you might like to explore that could be done remotely, that you could perhaps start as a side hustle and get your feet wet, or retool, take some courses, learn some new skills, and then get a job doing that? So, and again, also too, I think it's important to know yourself. Are you more comfortable being an employee, or are you more comfortable working for yourself? That's a pretty fundamental decision that I think needs to be made right off the hop.
You have these answers dialed in. This is all very well done. You're like, I got three categories for this, three steps for that. Okay.
It makes me, I know I sound like I know what I'm doing, don't I?
So when you come in, it's like I got the remote job, and then you literally wrote the book on how to get free accommodation. And
I did.
how many books have you written in general?
I've done a couple of collaborative books with various other writers, but the two that are mine are How to Get Free Accommodation Around the World, which is about the 5 different ways to get accommodation. Fun fact: I saved $100,000 on accommodation expenses in my first 10 years on the road
Okay, now we're
by doing
talking.
by doing the things in this book. So yeah, it's legit. Um, and then the other book I have is called Tales of Trains, where the journey is the destination. And it's about some of the more epic train rides I've done around the world. I've actually done way more since writing this book. I've probably ridden more feet, miles, kilometers of trains in more countries than people would even imagine trains are possible to travel through.
Okay, so you like
It's
trains.
it's intense. Yeah, I'm a little, maybe a little obsessive about my love of train travel, but
How
it's
much
okay.
money do you think you spent on train tickets?
Um, well, depending on the train ride, I mean, I have definitely spent some cash.
Like 20 grand
But
plus over the years?
yeah, you know what? Actually, for someone who tracks their expenses, I probably should know the answer to this. But when I think of train travel and I think of the cost of train travel, especially when it comes to the long distance trips, when you have, usually some kind of I make sure I have a cabin or roomette. So I've got, a place to sleep. They serve 3 meals in the dining car. And so it's transportation, hotel, and meals. And if I think about that over the, 3 or 4 day journey that I'm doing,
Yeah.
uh, the cost actually makes a little more sense sometimes for me.
Yeah. I want to tackle both these things. Let's come back to trains. I do love trains. Um, Regarding the free accommodation, let's talk about this briefly. I think my main question would be if someone's earning well, like someone's earning over 10K a month, is it worth investing the time in getting on these free house sitter websites and so forth and doing it? Or is this more for like quote unquote entry level nomads or something like that, where their time is a little bit less valuable and they can spend the time like, dealing with the homeowners? Because it's like what you're saving like $1,000 a month, but like you also kind of have responsibilities and stuff. But I can definitely see how it's worth it at the same time. So like, what do you think about that?
Brilliant question. And I'm so glad that you asked. So one of the things that I deduced of the 5 forms of free accommodation that are available out there, from if you're a digital nomad and you're working full time, I'll do you a favor and I'll rule out 3 of them
Okay.
and tell you that the 2 best forms of free accommodation that suit working full time at the same time would be either home exchanges or house sitting. Home exchanges are probably the best one because there's no real responsibilities. You just show up and stay in someone else's home, and you have the benefit of someone else staying in your place and taking care of your place in your absence. And it's not as hard to coordinate as you might think it was. You don't have to do these simultaneous exchanges with someone who happens to want to be in your place while you happen to want to be in theirs. There are
Oh
websites
no?
that triangulate all of this.
They
I
triangulate. So let's just say I
Yes.
have a house in Mexico and
Uh,
I want a house in Toronto. Uh, but I don't think someone's from Toronto is going to want to stay where I live in Mexico, or at least it'll be kind of tough. Like, how does that work?
So what you would do is you would list your place for the dates that you plan on traveling, and then you would look for places in Toronto. So you would might be staying in someone else's place and they're in Timbuktu, and that's fine. And if someone chooses to stay in your place, and they could be from Oklahoma, you will basically get like
It's like a
points in the
credit
bank. So
system. It's a
exactly,
point system. Okay.
yeah. So that is generally how that works. I have lots of colleagues who swear by home exchanges.
Yeah.
The
I've seen a
next
few of
one,
these sites. I've seen a few of these sites, and they'll be like, sign up now for like 150 points. And I'm like, I really don't think these points are worth anything. But maybe with like the top, maybe with the top websites, it's like legit. What's the best? What are the best ones right now?
it's a good question. I don't have a lot of experience with home exchanges myself to be able to say which one is the best right now, but I'm pretty sure homeexchange.com is the leader
Okay.
in that field. However, a very simple search for home exchanges will reveal a plethora of different sites, and the best one for you might also depend on where your place is and what kind of travel you like to do.
Okay. Okay. Cool.
But
And
I
hit me
do
with the
have
other one.
the other one is house sitting. So now this doesn't require a simultaneous exchange of any kind. However, I will also say that house sitting, and I adore house sitting because it gives you all the comforts of home. It's just somebody
Hmm.
else's home. So you
Hmm.
also have that unique opportunity to live
Right.
locally in a local
Usually you're
home.
like taking care of animals.
So that's the X factor. House sitting gigs vary dramatically in terms of the responsibilities of the house sitter and also in terms of what the house sitter gets.
Hmm.
So you want to choose a gig that is going to suit your lifestyle and location preferences. Like, what do you want to get out of that destination? Like, if you want to go to France, but you don't necessarily want to be staying in the country, 50 miles from anything, and they need you to bring your own car, and they want you to manage their Airbnb, and they've got 20 goats, might not be might not be your dream job. However, it might be someone else's dream job. Who knows?
Yeah, yeah. Hey guys, quick interruption to tell you about Bitrefill. Bitrefill is the best way to convert your crypto into gift card balances. These are gift cards that you can spend at hotels.com, Airbnb, Nike, and many more. You may remember Joel Valenzuela, previous podcast guest. He's been living on crypto exclusively since 2015, and he's a big consumer of Bitrefill. And so I asked Joel, I said, what do you like most about Bitrefill? He said that he likes the instant delivery, the precise amount so that you don't have to juggle a lot of gift cards, and he loves the global selection. Nobody else has this much selection of gift cards, over 10,000 gift card options across hundreds of countries. Go to bitrefill.com to sign up, and you can also use the code MyLatinLife for 10% back off your first purchase. Go to bitrefill.com for more information.
So it's important to select gigs that are going to be
I hear it's
what
really
you want to do.
competitive though. Like you have to apply and like the best ones have like 50 applications type of thing.
100%. But you can use a few tips and techniques, which of course I share in the book, that will cut down, like that will put you at the top of the email boxes and will get you the most eyeballs for whatever it is you're at, whatever gig it is that you want to do. So there are definitely ways to make sure that you get noticed and hired for house sitting gigs. And like I've had some pretty sweet gigs throughout the years as well. However, I am going to now jump to your last point in the question of, is it worth it if you're just saving $1,000 a month? And I have two answers to this question: yes and no. um, yes, it's worth it if you want a unique experience. Like some of the places that I have house sat in were like very lavish, expensive properties in desirable areas of places that I would not be able to afford to visit and that
Mhm.
would cost many multiples of
Yeah,
$1,000 a month.
I can see
So
that.
it gives me a unique experience. And I may or may not have any actual responsibilities in that gig either. So I've had a few of those gigs that were just like, there's no possible way I could have this experience on my own in this country. However, I will also say that it's been a bunch of years since I've house sat. And the reason is I do like having a little more control over my schedule. I don't like being beholden to animals. I do want the ability to explore. So, unless a house sitting gig comes to me these days through a referral and it's a gig that helps me really have whatever experience at that destination that I want to have, I tend to just do what you're saying and I self fund my experiences, or I'm doing something a little bit different, like co living and co working programs or whatnot. So I'm definitely, I still think house sitting is amazing and I've had some life changing experiences with it, but I'm not actively seeking
Yeah,
out house sitting
I
gigs right
feel
now.
you. I think what I might do is like with my girlfriend, I'll just like put her in charge of it. I'll just be like, baby, if you find something sick, like I'm down.
Right?
Like, you know.
Totally. Totally. And you know what? And that's nice. The thing that kind of sucks about it is you do have to pick a house sitting site and pay a membership fee
Hmm.
if you want to be on that site and have a profile and get noticed and get gigs. But once you make that decision, then you can, yeah, I mean, you'll get email notifications of when new gigs come up that satisfy your criteria. Like you can say, I only want gigs in these sort of place. I only want these kinds of animals. I only want whatever it is. And then your inbox will send you those opportunities and you can jump on them if they sound really cool. And if you don't see any, well, no problem.
Okay, cool. All right, that's enough about free accommodation for now. Um, Trains is cool. You know what it makes me think of, and I did read this a bit in your bio. Is who is that guy? There's a famous travel writer who did the train trip all the way down the Americas. Paul Theroux. You know who Paul
Yep.
Theroux is?
Oh yeah, absolutely. He writes very poetically and romantically about train travel. He's written a bunch of different train books and journeys.
Hmm. He has.
So
Yeah. Sorry. Go ahead.
no, go ahead.
Well, yeah. Just tell me a little bit about. Tell me poetically and romantically about train travel.
I think I wrote an article actually on my site called something like Train Travel and Evangelists Rant. And it was actually based on, because I was reading one of Paul Thoreau's books about train travel. And he said it so beautifully in that, you read these travel article things in these travel magazines, and they start with something, like, as the plane circled the runway and I saw the palm trees, blowing in the wind, rather than they just come from some snowy destination and had just been basically transported artificially in this cylindrical tube to this new place and just plopped down into this travel experience. And train travel flips the narrative entirely because like I said in my book, the journey is the destination. So you get on a train and you go from A to B. You now have I'll speak with personally, I now have, when I take the train, a way greater sense of the distance between my point of origin and my destination, and how does the landscape look and how does it
Hmm.
change along the way. And the other interesting thing to get for the poetic side is, when you're traveling by train, nobody puts their best foot forward to the train tracks. There are never houses facing train tracks. However, trains will go behind houses and businesses and towns and cities
I
and
like that.
through
I like
places.
that. Yeah.
So you have a chance to see out the train window while you're traveling, kind of what places look from the back, front, out front. And it's not always an attractive scene, but I find it, I don't know, I just find it, it's like almost like I've got this secret glance into the secret lives of everywhere from where I'm going to where I arrive to.
Hmm.
And I really, when I arrive, then I really feel like I already kind of know the place. And I find that just delightful. I can also lose hours just looking out the train, looking out the window. And the people that you meet on trains, like, train travel is rarely, aside from some of the high speed trains in Europe that are very efficient, most trains are not necessarily time efficient or cost efficient. So the people who take trains normally have an interesting reason for being on the train, which inherently makes them interesting conversation partners.
And you try to do that. You try to talk people up, and
Absolutely. Yeah. So when I do long distance trips, there will be meals served in the dining car, and that's a great place to meet people, because oftentimes when you arrive at mealtime, you're going to be seated with other people who are on the same trip as you. So it's baked in that you're going to have conversations with other people who are on the train.
can you
And
give us
and
some
yeah, it's a
examples
really interesting.
of some of the ones that you've done maybe outside Europe, like some of the rougher trains?
The rougher trains. Well, so I did. I mean, so, all right, two noteworthy things that I've done on trains include, well, it all started when I rode every inch of rail in Australia, but that's not rough at all. That was delightful, all of that. But I rode actually 11,000 kilometers on trains in 11 days, purely with the goal to see if it was possible to get bored on a train. And that it didn't work. That was where I realized my love of train travel went really deep. I'd already done a lot of train travel until then, but with this whole idea of doing 11 days on trains just to see if I could get bored was
Hmm.
kind of a weird experiment that backfired on me. It became part of my book. So the very next year, I upped the ante and I did the world's longest overland route by train from Lisbon to Saigon, which is
You did the whole
25,000
thing?
kilometers. I did the whole thing, 25,000 kilometers in 30 days. So that was a mission and a half. I did that with a couple of colleagues of mine. We called it the Ultimate Train Challenge, and we kind of made a game out of it, and it was epic and amazing. And so those are the two major parts that go into my book about Tales of Trains. But even just a few years ago, I ended up circumnavigating the United States by train, which most people do not think of Amtrak as being a good place to do something like that. And I did it with someone who I had never met in person before. So that was an adventure. And then since then, after that, I covered off almost every other long distance train route in the States. So I've pretty much ticked off the United States in terms of long distance train travel. I've done all the major routes that are out there. And you wouldn't think that it was, you talk about, well, what's a rougher ride? People don't think of Amtrak as having, being really good for train travel. And again, it's not fast. You don't take the train if you want to get there quickly. But my advice is, especially when it comes to Amtrak, and what most people don't know, is that if you get a roomette, you do have your own space, you have a full bed at night, and you have 3 meals a day in the dining car with made to order wine and everything. Like it's actually quite nice. It is an enjoyable experience. And the advice is, it's obviously going to cost more than an economy seat. But again, think about the fact that you're getting a hotel and 3 meals a day. Right. And book it as far in advance as you can. And it might not cost as much as you think it needs to.
Yeah. This is really cool. I do love trains. Have you ever done one like hitchhike an industrial train? You know what I mean? Where it's like not a passenger train and you just like hop on top of the oil tanker thing?
Well, that would definitely be befitting of my moniker as the professional hobo. Like that would be, yeah, totally. And I recognize there's poetry to my name of hobo because of the origins of the term hobo being, reference to migrant workers of the 30s who would actually hitch rides on freight trains from town to town looking for work. No, can't say I've ever actually done that. As much as it sounds really cool. Although, when you talk about sitting on top of the oil tanker, there's a train in, I think, Mali that is it's like this overnight train ride that you do where you're literally, it's a coal train and you're literally sitting on a pile of coal exposed to the elements doing this ride that apparently is horrendously dangerous, but it's a thing now.
Do you have any, what would you call it, like bucket list train trips where maybe they're in Africa, something like that, where it's like bucket list routes that you would like to do?
There's definitely a few routes that I still would really like to do. Definitely. Listen, so for luxury, the Blue Train in South Africa and the Orient Express, please and thank you. I would love to do those.
Orient Express, that doesn't exist anymore, right? That's like Turkey it's like Turkey to Serbia or something.
It is. Well, there's a few different routes because there's the Venetian one and then there's the Turkish one. So I don't know the specific routes, but it is back. It was sunset for a while and now they are back and in business and it looks amazing. But that's like super uber duper luxury, like that bucket list travel for sure. So that would be, it's not very unlike some of the other train experiences that I've had.
Orient Express is pretty historic. That's like one of the most historic train routes in the world, right?
Yeah, it is.
So there's that.
I'd also like to do the, there's 2 routes left in Canada that I haven't done. One is from Montreal to Halifax, and that's fairly unremarkable. It's just a 24-hour train ride to go east from Montreal, which I haven't done yet. So obviously I'd like to do it. But a little more remarkable would be the train north from Winnipeg to Churchill. And Churchill is like, it's way up. It's not in the Arctic Circle, but it's close. That's where the polar bears are. So you get polar bears, beluga whales, and northern lights, depending on what time of year you go. So that could be, and the polar bears are hit and miss, but if you time it right, you can catch them on the edge of their migration. So that would be really cool.
Interesting. Have you done any in Mexico?
I have not, which now actually I was about to turn it over to you and ask about what your train adventures and experiences have been like.
I'm definitely not trying to stack up to you in terms of being a train expert, but it's something I've always had a passion for, the trains. I remember in the Paul Theroux book, there's his most famous one is The Great Train Bazaar, and I think the other one, I got to look it up, but it's where he does Latin America by train, and the way it kind of starts is he's in Boston, and he hops on the subway train, which connects to the Amtrak train, and he hops on the subway, and the way he kind of wrote it was he said like all these people are commuting to work. They don't realize I'm taking the train all the way to Peru today. You know, I thought that was really cool.
I love that moment as well. I remember reading that and feeling that how curious that was. There's another guy, I'd have to look it up, that wrote a book similar. He was inspired by this journey that Paul Theroux did, where he took buses all the way down, possibly to Chile. I'm not sure, but it was all by bus, and he started in New York City. And he
Mhm.
tweeted about that, and I think he was writing for National Geographic about that experience as well. And he did turn it into a book, and that was really interesting. Any of these
Mhm.
kind of like, I'm intrigued by people who choose an epic journey to do
Mhm.
for the sake of doing it. It's like me doing the ultimate train challenge, or some of the other, challenges that I've done, whether they're internal challenges or something that you want to accomplish for some external reason, like, I don't know, breaking a world record or something. It,
Mhm.
it doesn't really matter what that motivation is, but choosing a mission, choosing something like
Yeah,
major, and
you have a
doing it
mission.
and going for it, I think it's fantastic. And there's nothing bad that can come from it. Even if you don't complete that mission, if you don't finish it, the adventure of going after it, I don't know, it lights me up. I love it.
Hey everybody, hey everybody. Quick break from the podcast to tell you about Language Blend, the best new way to learn Spanish. Language Blend was co-founded by Jake Nomada, friend of the podcast, decade of experience in Latin America, and Jake and his team, they put everything into this program that they wish they had in terms of how to level up quickly with your Spanish language skills. Because the faster that you can get conversationally fluent in Spanish, the better the experience that you're going to have in Latin America. So go to languageblend.com for more information. Yeah, one of my buddies likes to find an alliteration to his travels, like so it's like the same letter, so it'll be like Madrid to Manila, or you know what I
Ah,
mean? So
I
that
like
way,
it.
even something that doesn't have a super purpose, it like has like a catchy name, and it
Yeah.
like makes it easier to be like, yeah, Madrid to Manila, yeah. You know what I mean?
And that's cute, because then he could say, that, I mean, that's like a party pleaser. It's like, yeah,
Yeah.
every time I travel, I make sure I go to some place that has alliteration.
Yeah, yeah. What would have been, so you got 1,000 articles, a lot of YouTube videos. What have been some of your most popular um, pieces of work or writing that have struck the most with people? And you could answer that either in terms of literally view count or just like the ones where maybe you got the most emails and outpouring of support.
It's a great question. So, if we take a look at my website, there's a few resources that I'm really proud of, because I think that they really serve a great purpose. One of which is a resource that I created because, for selfish reasons, ultimately, like when I was looking for accommodation, or when I do look for accommodation that I want to rent by the month, I want to go somewhere as part of my digital nomad lifestyle. And I'm not a big fan of Airbnb for reasons I shan't bore you with, but I wanted to know, because I know there's lots of alternatives to Airbnb. And there are some places in the world where you can just show up, like Chiang Mai is an example of a place that you can just show up and you can find accommodation on the ground. But there's other places where that's not possible. You really need to arrange something in advance. And there's all kinds of websites to help you do this, but a lot of people don't know about them. So I created a resource on my website that is all about alternatives to Airbnb for people who want to find monthly rentals around the world. And I keep that up to date regularly. And it's also my first point of research when I'm searching for accommodation myself. So I like things like that are really useful resources that can be bookmarked.
Mhm.
And my readers evidently do as well. I also have some personal travel writing articles and essays that serve, maybe don't serve a purpose in terms of teaching you anything, and it's not 5 ways to do this, and it's not
Right.
what
It's
to
like the
do in this
time slows down
place.
type of stuff, like philosophical ramblings.
Yeah, like I have two articles that I'm probably the most proud of them, and unfortunately, because they're not really super search friendly, they don't really get discovered. But one is called "All Life Is Suffering." Uh, um, All Life Is Suffering. It's something about my time in Kopangan, Thailand, and it ultimately talks about a time in my life, but also this experience of doing this 7 day fasting detox program in Koh Phangan in Thailand, which was just bizarre. The other one was Panchakarma, and it was about a month that I spent in India and experiencing heaven and hell simultaneously. And it's a parallel story of my month in India as well as my month of doing Panchakarma and exploring the heaven and hell therein. And again, like very, very personal musing. And one of these experiences, like just from a creative writing standpoint, I think is really standout writing, but it doesn't always get discovered. What is personal and does get discovered, though, are some of my musings. Like I've talked about all the relationships that I've had on the road, and their success or lack thereof. Why they were challenges. I talk about, I have a collective article about brace yourself. Travel isn't all roses and lollipops, and it's a place that's a catch-all place for all of the kind of like not really cool things that have happened on the road. And that was born because someone emailed me and said, "Hey, Nora, like this lifestyle is all great and everyone writes about how fabulous it is, but like what's it really like? Like it can't be all good all the time." And I was like, "Oh no, it's not. The bad stuff happens on the road. Bad stuff happens at home. But if you want to know about the bad stuff that happens on the road, here you go." And so I discussed what it's like to experience these things that could happen anywhere at any time in some cases, but that are, when we live on the road, life is lived in technicolor. So sometimes they take on different flavors when we're on the road. So those are a few examples of things that you can find on my website, from personal musics to actual bookmarkable resources.
Yeah, I bet there's some gems in there for sure.
Indeed. It's hard to find your way through all of those articles, but if you if you show up on my homepage, there's a couple of freebies. There's a 2-week email course that gives you the kind of the ups and downs, the basics of long-term lifestyle travel. And that also introduces you to a lot of the bits of content that I have on my website through a series of emails that you get over 2 weeks. But yeah, you just have an adventure of clicking around from the homepage, and you usually find yourself going down one rabbit hole or another.
What's it like coming back home to Canada after an epic mission to India or Thailand or 9 months in Ecuador or whatever it is? It's a very interesting phenomenon of being a traveler, checking back in and visiting back.
It is. And to be honest, it's not always an easy experience. My first 12 years on the road, I did not have a home base. So I didn't have any place in Toronto. So when I did come back for visits, I was, sleeping on couches or in spare rooms if I was lucky. And, reverse culture shock is real. Your relationships with people back home can change, sometimes for the better. I was often pleasantly surprised at how my life had kind of changed. My life and some of my viewpoints had changed in a similar way to the people that I was close to in Toronto, but also completely independent of one another. Like suddenly we would just kind of meet on a new level. And that was kind of exciting. I often used my trips back to Toronto as a way to, it's like a barometer to see how I have grown and changed along the way. Because my family and friends in Toronto are my constant. They're the people that know me the longest and that also can check in. So like sometimes on my visits, I might come back for a visit and it would be reflected to me, "Wow, Nora, you don't seem like, you're a little, are you happy? Are things going okay?" Or the opposite. "Wow, Nora, whatever you're doing, just keep doing it because you are on fire right now." So I could feel that, whereas sometimes I might not have realized that my own transformation had been as noticeable over time as it was to them when they saw me again. So that's an interesting way of being able to use those check-ins with family and friends in positive ways. Now that I have a place here, I get to see my family and friends a little bit more often, but I still travel usually for, on average, I travel for 3 months at a time, but I'm about to go on a 4-month trip. I've gone on 7-month trips. I'm traveling more than I'm here for sure. But I do definitely have more time here than I did in the years when I didn't have a place here.
Mm. One cool thing about Toronto is they have communities of people from all the countries you're visiting. So when you come back to Toronto, you can like hit the restaurant of that country, like get some Tibetan food or whatever it is, and
Right.
be like, yeah,
Totally.
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, Toronto is the most multicultural city in the world, and I feel so blessed to have come from Toronto because I think that that partly is what really set me up really nice for traveling the world. Was already understanding how big the world is and how many different viewpoints people can have by virtue of where they grew up.
It's amazing. It's amazing. I know there's so much we could have dug into this episode, but this is all we have time for today. So, Nora, thanks again for doing this. Why don't you take this time to again, direct the audience to your website and wherever you want to send their
Cool.
attention.
Absolutely. Well, I do have a free gift for anyone who goes to theprofessionalhobo.com/free gift. You can pick up a checklist of 10 things to do before you travel long term. And that is some of the bases that I was referring to earlier that you might want to make sure you have covered before you take off on your next big adventure. And the professionalhobo.com really is the starting place. You'll find links to everywhere else I am on the net. But if YouTube is your poison of choice, then just go to YouTube and search for Nora Dunn, and you will find me there as well. And you can generally find me at the Professional Hobo on most social channels.
Okay, nice. I'm signing up for the free gift right now.
Right, sweet.
Cool. So this has been another episode of the My Latin Life podcast. Again, my guest today, Nora Dunn, the Professional Hobo. Thank you to Nora and to the audience for listening.
Thank you. Ciao.